What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. This is one of our home team episodes. It is going to be Gabe Yanez, MDV, and myself. MDV might need to jump off a little early, but we are going to get talking. Now, here's the thing. You guys might be realizing as a home team episode, sometimes we have Dennis on. Actually, a lot of times we have Dennis on. Sometimes I miss him. But in this particular case, Dennis got super sick. And so I think it's just an example, Gabe, of how I am just fitter than Dennis because I'm still healthy and he got sick. Even though he lifts 550 pounds with no problems, that's my consensus on what happened to Dennis. So good morning.
Good morning, Jay. Coming out hot.
Shit talker Khalipa over here.
Nobody gets sicker than you when you get sick, dude.
That is true.
When you get sick, I've never seen anybody get more sick and more turned, like you're just turned off. It's like a power switch goes out or something.
Dude, as he was saying that, I was like, I don't think I know anyone with a more sensitive stomach than Jason Khalipa. Jason Khalipa has gotten the stomach flu like every 4 weeks. He's like, dude,
bad
ate something.
Bad cheese.
Last night, the stomach flu. So I was like, interesting take by Mr. Jason Khalipa over here. Wow,
dude, the worst was I was patient 0 for COVID. I was the first.
You might
COVID,
have been.
I was the first COVID case.
I have a good picture of that.
In Miami.
Oh, you were so sick.
We were at this big fitness event called Wadapalooza. And I had, whenever we go out to these events, in general, I'll pack a pretty decent schedule, just the way it works, right? If I'm going to leave my family, I'm going to pack the schedule. And dude, we had a packed schedule. I can't remember exactly what we were doing. But bro, I got so sick. I ate an empanada. I thought it was the empanada, but I don't think it was the empanada because it's like a fried empanada. The chances of that getting me sick was slim. But dude, I was out.
Do you remember how fucking dingy the place that we got the empanada from?
It was like a gas station empanada.
The bathroom was connected to the kitchen, dude. It was like I remember vividly going into this place and being like, I'm not eating anything here.
Oh, there's a lot of red flags.
I'm not eating anything here. And you downed a couple of Miami street empanadas that.
Oh, dude, you're right.
But here's the thing,
again, was connected to the kitchen.
Yeah, there was like an open bathroom in the kitchen.
We all ate them though. Only Jason got sick.
I don't think I ate any of the empanada.
Maybe you didn't. Yeah,
I could see how MDV would be like, we're good.
I'm passing on the empanada.
Cubano coffees and fried empanadas from a gas station with the bathroom in the kitchen. That's what got me sick. It wasn't the Cubanos. It was probably the empanadas, or I just got COVID.
Remember how laid out he was, like on the couch at the
of course,
just gray
with a
just completely gray.
Yeah, he didn't look great. Oh,
dude,
man.
we like hosted like an event for gym owners. I just remember going there and like talking to a bunch of gym owners, and be like, dude, I gotta get the hell out of here. And anyway, shout out to Watify. They're our friends in that collaboration. But I was talking smack about Dennis, but I miss that guy. He is just such a beacon of health and wellness, and obviously crushing it as a dad, husband. But dude, the fact that he could just walk into his gym and pull 500 pounds anytime he wants is just so inspiring to me. I want to be able to do that, but I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that again. That's it.
So Jay, you said that there was something you wanted to talk about. What happened with the men's club?
Oh, okay. So this is a what do you want to call this? A case study. Okay. So this is going to be a case study. We're going to call this guy John.
Very formal case study.
So we have a case study occurring where John, this gentleman is at his largest, was like 300 pounds, 275. He's a big guy. He's a bigger guy. 5'11", 6 foot big guy, comes to the men's club. Just looks like he could run through a brick wall, right? And he wants to go from 255 to 225. That's his goal at 5'11", big guy, thick. He currently follows our Train Hard app, the Flex program, on a regular basis. Okay. And he had cancer. So he's had some chemotherapies and some other type of stuff. He is utilizing he's done his blood work. He's getting all that regularly checked. So he's also tracking his macros right now. And he follows the Train Hard 5 protocol. Okay. So this guy, John, and I were having coffee yesterday. And I've been talking to him about helping him with some accountability because it's an area that, he wants to get better about. So I'm sitting there listening to him. He's like, all right, dude, I'm 255, trying to get down to 225. I'm in okay shape. I'm trying to get in better shape. I currently follow Flex and I just started looking at your Train Hard 5 protocol. So him and I were talking about what we could do to improve, and he travels and stuff. But I'm wondering, I'll start here. If the goal is to go from 255 big, again, like muscular, and go to 225 just leaner. So he wants to reduce some body fat. He's already in great shape, but he wants to reduce body fat. Is doing flex alone and following the Train Hard 5 protocol going to take him from 255 to 225 in that way? And I'll start with Gabe on this case study because I have my own opinions, but I'm curious what he thinks.
Do you know his percentage body fat before we hand it over to Gabe?
I'd say he's probably low 20s. Right? Like, I mean, he's low to mid 20s, like low 20s, probably 20%.
Well, when you ask the question, like, does following flex and RTH5 nutrition protocol alone, I guess like my immediate follow-up question would like, I guess, what does that insinuate? Like, would be in addition to, because I think that for 99% of people out there, there's just so much low-hanging fruit and opportunity there that absolutely you would see results. It's always tough to tell with like kind of his background and again, like not knowing body fat percentage, like are those numbers like super specific? Like
daily activity
maybe
level.
he'd need, to actually count all macros and like just make sure that he's in a caloric deficit. What is he doing outside of flex? You're doing flex and you're sitting like all the time. That is, to me, not as good as you maybe following a program that's not ideal, doesn't have progressive overload, isn't like, so well thought out, but you're getting 10,000 steps a day. I'll take that over, doing flex by the book and being super sedentary the rest of the time, any day of the week. And that isn't anything to say negative about the program. I think the program's great. It's what I follow, but there's just so much kind of other considerations that it's a tough question to like exactly answer. But that being said, I think that if people are following any structured program, honestly, and, abiding by the principles that are outlined in TH5, which is prioritize protein, cut out alcohol, 3 straight meals, progress picture to make sure you're tracking and being consistent, not necessarily being perfect, I can't see how anyone wouldn't see progress. Now, what specific progress? And then the last thing that I'll say is, what's the timeline too? He can absolutely get from 255 to 225 indefinitely if he just keeps doing these things 100%. But is he trying to do that in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like, what does that look like? Because you can always pull on these levers to get to an end goal faster. The double-sided, the other side of that is always like, the further you go from what's sustainable, the more you risk like the rubber band and the pendulum like swinging back in the other direction to where, sure, you can do that in 30 days, but you're going to white knuckle it so bad for 30 days and not really make anything into a habit that you might, take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. So that's
Super
another
solid
part that you need to consider too. Like, what's the setting a realistic timeline for what you want to accomplish is incredibly, incredibly important. Something that a lot of people miss when in the beginning of the year, they're like, hey, I'm going to do 75 hard, whole 30, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those kind of like jumpstart challenges can be super helpful if you need that jumpstart challenge. You need that like IV of motivation, right? Like you need that, hey, I need to do this daily. I need to make some serious changes, need to turn these things around and know that maybe of the 10 things you're going to do in that 30, 75 or 100 days, whatever it is, maybe you continue on with 2 or 3 of them going forward. But during that concentrated time, you're really dialing in. Jay, do you know what his like rate of weight loss is currently? Like, is he losing 1 or 2 pounds a week? Because that's another thing. If he's continuing to lose 2 pounds a week here and he's feeling good, he has energy, he's enjoying his workouts, that's a pretty good rate of weight loss too. And like he could just continue that going forward. But if he's plateaued or if he sees himself now going up, like, Gabe was kind of highlighting, we don't know whether or not he's kind of in maintenance or is he, eating in a surplus. But I generally agree with like everything Gabe said.
Yeah, I think the reason why I posed the question, and I thought your answer, Gabe, I thought you set the tone really well. Like, if you're doing those 2 things, because I didn't know if you would expect at his body weight, at his size, right? Flex, I mean, because would you need additional like, I don't know, I was going to say like go out for a walk. Like one of the recommendations I gave him was to burn some additional calories and get in some additional movement, was to either load up a backpack or wear a weight vest or whatever and just go for a walk with his family or his dog. Like 2, 3, 4 times a week would just add in a little bit more caloric, like I guess better deficit. But I think that the question you asked, MDV, is really important too. Is like, I didn't ask the question. This is one of the reasons why I want to bring this up to you guys, is that, you know, I talk to guys every day about this stuff. And so sometimes I'm just having a lot of conversations, but I think that I'm looking for more depth in some of these conversations to really help solve problems and create transformations. And I think asking like, what are you currently losing? I didn't ask that. That's a miss on my part, right? Because if I assumed there was a plateau, but maybe there wasn't. I just assumed there was. You know what I mean? So that's a great question to ask on the follow-up. And I'll share that here on what that comes up with.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that, you know, Gabe mentioned, this non-exercise movement is just so important to additional caloric burn, right? And not even just if you're talking additional caloric burn, but like just getting your body moving, blood flowing, you know, not sitting all day. You know, I think if that's something that if you're only doing 3 workouts a week and that's what you're relying on, or 4 workouts a week and that's what you're relying on for your fitness, I think that there's a lot of low hanging fruit with just taking 20 or 30 minutes every day and, you know, walking, doing something, getting outside, walking, stretching, moving your body, just literally just moving around, whatever you're going to do with it. And that will add a huge boost. And not only for weight loss, but just for general health.
Yes, super important. And, you know, one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough is exactly what you were alluding to, MDB, like just like what's a realistic rate of loss for people. And there's so many like implications that go into that. Like how much actual body weight is there to lose? You know, are you also chasing a performance goal at the same time? Like that's my biggest thing. I remember like listening to this on the podcast probably like 5-6 years ago now. And it's such a like brain explosion moment for me, but it made so much sense. And you guys probably relate to this. There's so many people, and the Open's happening now. So many people back in the day when like the Open was like the big kind of like time to like test yourself and perform for a lot of people in the CrossFit space, that they would quote unquote clean up their nutrition leading up to the Open. And for many people, cleaning up their nutrition was going into caloric deficit because for some reason, you know, people equate I've cleaned up my nutrition with like being leaner. But is there benefits to being leaner? Of course. But the month or the weeks leading up to when you want to have peak performance is the worst time to be in a caloric deficit, because a caloric deficit is a stressor. It makes it harder for you to perform, makes it harder for you to hit workouts hard. Now, for people that are just trying to generally improve body composition, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to take that into consideration, because I do know that there are a lot of people that like, hey, like I'd like to look a little different, but I also have like a high rocks race coming up that I'd like to do well for, or I'm training for a marathon, or maybe the Open is something that you're still, you know, striving for. Understanding that in terms of like seasonality and periodizing, you know, when you're really focused on losing fat or whether you're just maintaining, I think is very, very important, because that becomes very easy to burn the candle on both ends, more susceptible to injury, or just like, you know, get to the point where you're so exhausted and bogged down because you're training very hard for this performance goal and also not just eating enough, that like, not only do you slow down the like walks you're taking, but like NEAT, you know, non-exercise activity. I forget what the exact words are for, but that isn't going out for walks. That's literally like the rate at which you blink, how much you fidget, like how much your body moves, like all that slows down significantly if you're in a very steep deficit and you're also training very hard. And people don't realize how much of an impact that stuff has, because you're so just depleted that your body constantly wanting to like survive and maintain slows everything down. And now you feel shitty. You're not burning as many calories. You're not going to hit the performance goal, and you're plateauing on the body composition goal. You're basically like, you know, doing yourself a detriment on every single area. And it's easy to get there for people that like, and I've been there, are impatient and don't have realistic, you know, expectations of how long it's going to take for me to, you know, lose 5% body fat while also training for this marathon, while also not trying to like feel shitty and feel hungry all the time. All that is possible, but then you have to take your, you know, outlook of when that's going to be realistic. And maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's 18 months. You have to be okay with that.
Yeah. It's prioritization of goals, right? Like, you know, one of the things that I remember back in the day when we were talking a lot with CrossFit Games athletes leading up to the games, it's like there was this big, the kind of a misconception, like the athletes who came in leanest sometimes would perform best. And like what you were saying here is that over the course of that weekend, like 3, 4, 5 days of competition extended out, like you had to have fuel, not only like to ingest throughout that, a massive amount of fuel to ingest throughout that, but like you may not wanted to have been like your exact leanest going into that type of event, like a 3 or 4 multi-day event with multiple events per day. Like that's a really high risk scenario coming into like a major caloric deficit at your absolute leanest. But like if you're talking about the open workout and you're talking about, you want to do well in the open workout, you can somewhat balance those kinds of things a little bit more, right? Like it's a one workout every Friday, and when you have to go out there, you know what it's going to take from you. You kind of know what the workout is already too. So it's not as big of a risk per se versus, hey, I've got it all on the line for 3 days here, 5 events a day. And, I'm coming in skin and
It's like
bone.
weight cutting. Dude, it's like weight cutting. Like, I
Bro,
mean, dude,
the weight cutting stuff is wild.
Wild. I mean, I did that
Insane.
before a jiu-jitsu tournament one time. I'll never do it again. Like it was
Wild, dude.
I felt terrible, dude. Like, you know what I mean?
These
Like,
guys getting close to, some of these guys get pretty close to like, I don't want to say death, but like they are completely depleted to the point that they need help walking to the scale during the weigh-ins at the major UFC events. Need help. Can't move their body physically enough. Don't have enough energy or hydration to get to the scale to make weight.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, anyways, I like, so I'm going to go back. I need to have some further follow-up questions, but I think the answer to this is like, dude, if you're following our flex track and if you're following the Train Hard 5 principles, especially the 50 grams of protein per meal, dude, that's not easy to get 50 grams of protein per meal. I mean, it's not like the craziest, hardest thing ever, but you have to like try. You have to try and have like your ground beef or whatever it is. And so you're not going to be grabbing a bunch of crap because you're utilizing protein as this awesome fuel source. So that's that, along with looking at like additional outside of the gym movement, I think is where we could start tightening it up for John. We'll use John as an example. But I do want to add one more thing. I get this question all the time, almost every day. Someone messages me and says, dude, I love jiu-jitsu. I love CrossFit, strength conditioning. How do I balance the two? I get this question so much. And I just want to answer it here because I think it's really important that it's all based on what your goals are and where you see the greatest potential to improve your overall fitness. Like, dude, if you're brand new to jiu-jitsu and you're in love with it and you're super jacked and super fit, spend more time on the mats. If you've been on the mats for years and you haven't exposed yourself to much fitness, spend some more time out there. But like, you got to find that blend based on what your goals are and how much you want exposure to that particular thing. And you got to be real about, hey, I'm pretty fit and capable, but man, my jiu-jitsu sucks, or vice versa. Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle and then you can do 50% and 50%. But I think it's really important that everyone listening, like if you're questioning how you should break up your training, dude, follow one of our programs, 100%. And then add in jiu-jitsu to then round out where you want to go. And if you have a jiu-jitsu tournament coming up, you might need to prioritize that over additional workouts for that time being, and then get back into the next season. So I want to have that discussion a little bit here because I get that question too much.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me when I was actively doing jiu-jitsu because I've taken some time off from jiu-jitsu because I had a hip surgery that I need to recover from. And then I went back on the mats and kind of felt it out a little bit, was feeling good. And then, unfortunately ruptured an Achilles here at the beginning of this year, which I'm healing from right now. I do want to get back into jiu-jitsu, but when I was doing jiu-jitsu very, very regularly, which I would call 3 to 4 times a week when I was active in it, it was hard for me to balance this idea of how often am I doing other types of training. It was really difficult for me because, as somebody who came from a background of like training 5-6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week of just doing something, the days that I was doing jiu-jitsu, sometimes it felt like, oh, do I have to go do more now? Like, do I have to do something additional on top of this? And then the days that I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu, I was kind of like, thinking about like, oh, am I going to be really sore if I do this? Ultimately, what worked best for me was having some non-negotiables about like daily activity. At least I was going to walk every single day or do some sort of like 20 or 30 minute like simple cardio session, low intensity type of deal. That was happening almost always, no matter what. Body weight movement at some point was also happening probably in the morning for a certain number of reps just to like move my body and feel good. So that was happening mostly every single day, no matter if I was doing a workout later in the gym or if I was going to jiu-jitsu. Those things were happening as non-negotiables. And then for 3 days a week, I was doing jiu-jitsu, and I didn't really do anything on top of the training that I did that day, aside from, walking, bodyweight movement, jiu-jitsu. And then I tried to get in at least 3 solid, kind of like full body weightlifting sessions, kind of like a flex style workout, when I was doing jiu-jitsu. And I felt really, really good doing that.
Mm. Yeah.
The other, and I haven't got bit by the jiu-jitsu bug yet. I'm sure I will eventually. But
almost
way,
every
like
person on podcast tries to get you to do it.
I mean, it's
can't wait.
Happen.
I can't wait to get back into it.
I just have to get to the point where like I can take my kids as well and make that a reason that I'm going. But anyway, I think that another really important piece of it, Jay, is like just how much overall training volume are you coming from, right? Because for someone like me, for example, who now for, 2 years has been doing some sort of, I was running for a really long time, plus doing flex. Like I'm already doing 2 disciplines and I've been doing it for a long time. Like for me, it's going to be very different than someone that's just been doing flex maybe for 2 years that wants to jump onto the mats for the first time, because I have accustomed my body. While running and jiu-jitsu are obviously very different, you've accustomed your body to a certain level of volume. Like that's the thing that I always tell you, Jay, makes you a very just kind of like one of one. Like you don't take rest days. You're getting after it like at a pretty, tough level every day. But you've been doing that for years. Like your body's just so accustomed to the volume that no one else does, that it's impossible for someone to look at like, what's Jason's average week? And, I'm going to do that. Like the balance is always relative to where you're coming from. And I think that that's an incredibly important thing for people to consider. I've been thinking a lot back on this like sciatica issue that, stopped me and I wasn't able to do my marathon. And I was doing so much training volume. I was doing flex 4 times a week and running, at that point, because we were like in the meat and potatoes of a marathon training block, like 50 miles a week of running plus 4 flex sessions that I was pretty much doing all of it.
Across like 4 days, right? It was like 4 days of running, right? Yeah.
No. So 6 days of running. It was 6 days of running. Yeah, 6 days of running. There was only 1 day off. And everything was all well and good. And again, like the issue started when I traveled. And I think that the other consideration to all of this is like, what's going on outside of the training? Because I think the reason that I was able to do all that prior to this long trip that we took is because like I'm at home, nutrition's all dialed in, I'm sleeping in my bed, like there's a routine, and that has such an impact on what you're able to take on the other side of things, where I think that this whole issue stemmed from, again, I was really pushing the limits to probably what the right amount of volume for me was anyway. And then I tried to continue to train that way because again, like, for many reasons, I just can't like just take a step back. But while traveling and now not in the bed, travel with kids, like terrible, terrible sleep because the kids just don't sleep the same when you travel. And you try and continue that same amount of volume. And that's another thing to consider when I hear about like, how do I balance this and this? It's like, okay, you're trying to balance jiu-jitsu and strength and conditioning, but you should also consider like, are you someone that does shift work and have an incredibly demanding job? Are you someone that is maybe manual labor, or do you have the luxury of like working from home, controlling what you eat? All those things are in line. Like that is such a big piece
distress.
of it. For sure, right? Like, are you in a season in your life when you're dealing with like, a lot of stuff that's just weighing you down? Dude, I'm reading the book Endure that Dennis recommended on an earlier podcast.
But that's not the one from Cameron Haynes. That's a different one.
No, it's a different one. It's the one that's all about like the psychological side of endurance sports. And dude, the amount of research that there is out there on so many people that they've had do like psychologically demanding work, like whether it's like do a really complex puzzle for 30 minutes versus another group. And then they go out and do like a purely physical test. And the impact it has is huge. Like we don't realize how much the demand on like our cognitive side impacts what we're able to do and how we're supposed to recover on the physical side. And I think that's something that people don't think enough. They're like, well, nothing's really changed. I'm training the same, but like maybe work got busier, maybe a relationship strained. Like you don't connect those two, but they're so incredibly connected. And I think that like all those are layers that I think about and that I've had to like, kind of like see how that's shaped my training and like my recovery, that I think people don't think enough about. And it's, again, you can go many, many layers into this, but I do think that that's not talked about enough.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway for me is like when I talk to these guys, like just doing a self-evaluation and self-reflection of like, where are you at? Like, I mean, dude, if you're in a season in your life, you just had a new kid, the chance of you trying to be super successful at jiu-jitsu and being jacked is like, you know, it's going to be harder than if you have less responsibilities, have less stressors going on. You could really balance out these different things. And I think just evaluating, hey, what are my goals? What am I trying to do? How do I break that up in a week's given time? Like even for me, when I was training and getting ready for the tactical games, I spent a lot more time at the range. And I knew that I had to give up some of my jiu-jitsu to spend more time at the range. Now I'm spending more time at jiu-jitsu than I am at the range, but yet I'm still getting exposure to that at least once a week. So that's the way that I'm thinking about it is like, what are my goals? How am I evolving? And then how do I look at this for the long game? Like I'm doing jiu-jitsu, like I'm trying to get my coral belt. Like I'm trying to go, I'm in this for life. And so because of that, I recognize that like whether I have 5 days of training this week or 3 or 2, it's really irrelevant in the grand scheme of things as long as I remain consistent with it. Same thing goes with my strength conditioning. Even though I train every day, you know, I don't have to go RP 10 every day because I'm again in it for the rest of my life. So I think doing that self-evaluation, I think is a great place to start, and then setting up goals where you want to go and then adjust your training appropriately based on what those goals are. So for me, like I've said on this podcast plenty of times, I train every day. I do jiu-jitsu 3 days a week, and I generally go to the shooting range once a week. That's in general what I do, and it works for me. But just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else.
It's definitely not going to work for somebody else. Let me ask, I'm curious to ask the two of you a question before we move on from the BJJ thing. As someone that, like, let's say I were to start tomorrow, in both of your opinions, what's the minimum days a week that you want to commit to have like a realistic in that beginning of the learning curve? Because you know what I mean? Like, obviously, learning curve is going to be shortened the more frequency you're going. But where is like is the pivotal place like 2 times a week versus 3 times a week? Is it like 2 times a week versus 4 times a week? Like, where in the beginning do you want to see yourself to like really start making some progress versus like, you know, this is going to take you forever?
My answer on this would be 2 to 3 times a week, but 3 times a week being kind of the gold standard. At least from my own experience for how it impacted me. I had, the learning curve in jiu-jitsu is pretty sharp. Like you come in, even having a wrestling background, I came in not really having like, things figured out like right away. Like I knew some stuff and, you know, had some capabilities on the mat and my wrestling was okay. But there's so much new to learn, and so many positions to be in. And it's a game of incomplete information and an active opponent. And, you know, I think the more that you get exposed to it, obviously the faster you'll learn. But then there's an overload too. Like you go in more than 3 times a week and you're just like, you could be drowning. So my rule for myself was to try to get there 3 times a week. And to like try to focus my learning and keep the journey in perspective as opposed to trying to think so many steps ahead, because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. I like the 2 to 3 times a week. I do think for someone who's interested in starting jiu-jitsu, I think that unlike other physical activities, there's a ton of value in jiu-jitsu in studying. So this sounds weird, but being on the mats is the best. But there's also a lot of value if you can't get into the mats or if you can't have training partners, just researching and watching tutorials on how the movements are done and where your positions are at. Unlike many other things that I've done, is like just understanding the mechanics can really play a huge role. And so if you could review that online, that could leapfrog you a little bit more too. So you don't always have to get into the gym. You could do your own research online. But I think 2 to 3 days a week is a great place to start. And like MDV did, you know, I think the privates are a great way to start. It's so just.
I started off with 10 privates.
It's just such a good way to go, man. I mean, a lot of the guys, the men's club, are starting to get into it and at least get exposure to it once or twice a week. And I think that you don't need to catch this bug, man. Like we talk about jiu-jitsu a lot on this show. You don't need to like become like a jiu-jitsu practitioner that goes and competes. But I think just exposing yourself to it, I think you'll look back a year from now and be like, damn, that was cool. I'm glad I started that.
The private plus going to class 3 times a week was huge. So I would do a private for an hour and then have class afterwards. And that was really great because the privates were reinforcing the fundamentals that I was also learning at the same time in class, but in a one-on-one environment. So I could work on things that were kind of particular to me or the questions that I had. But the other thing, I think the misconception too about jiu-jitsu is that like every time that you go, that it has to be all out, do or die, fucking 80cc finals. It doesn't have to feel like that. You can go to class, and most classes have a mix of technical and then drilling, and then maybe some open rolls at the end. So you learn things at the beginning of class. Most of the times you drill them. And then sometimes, if not most of the time, there's also some live open rolls. And then you can kind of toggle your intensity, or you kind of figure out your intensity in those open rolls. And you don't have to go, life or death every single time that you roll. You can flow roll. You can work with partners who understand where you're at and like get good feedback. And I think sometimes the misconception is that when it's time to go live, that it has to be, 100% live all the time. It doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
From these are all really tough questions to ask, but from like an RP perspective, if you had to, what would you say the average class without, you having to go crazy falls under? Is it like an RP 7 type experience, RP 5? Does it just, is it an impossible question to answer and it just kind of like really depends on the day? Or for someone that's familiar with fitness and fitness programming, what's your average class looking like? Because if I were to start and say, 2-3 times a week, how am I putting that into my other days of training based off of like, hey, I have a really hard day tomorrow, so I don't want to do jiu-jitsu the day before, or maybe I do, or I want to do it on the same day. Like, what would you guys say is like the average class stimulus that you get from like purely a physical perspective, not like learning new skills and like being completely uncomfortable, fish out of water, like all that I know is challenging in its own respect, like purely from like the energy that you have to like put out to like, make it from beginning to end.
What should it be, or what do you think it is? You know what I mean? Like,
well, what's your opinion?
Because those are two different things. What it should be is somewhere in like that 7 range. And then there's exceptions to go up higher if you're competing. But for a lot of new people, they're in the RP 10 and they're not gaining as much as they should out of it because they're freaking out. But it's very common.
Is the benefit there? Should like my goal as a beginner to be like, hey, if you're going to go 3 times a week starting next week, like 2 of those 3 classes should feel like an RP 5 and like one day maybe an RP 7. Like, would that be your recommendation for someone starting? Like, that's how you should feel getting out of class. Like, you shouldn't feel, especially as a beginner, like that was a tough workout. You should feel like, hey, I learned and I got a pretty good sweat in and I left a lot on the table. Is it similar to when, we're dosing a beginner into fitness, or not really, if you come from a fitness background?
I think different schools have different schools of thought on this. That it kind of depends sometimes on the place that you go. There is some places that it's like baptism by fire and you learn through like mostly rolls and like the technique is less. I would just say from my experience from the gyms that I've gone to, during you warm up, you learn a technique, which is a relatively low intensity experience. Like you're very, very intentionally moving through this slowly with a partner. Then you potentially will drill that in some sort of like drill or technical type of form where like the RPE is going up a little bit more, but you still are getting 2-way feedback about how things are going. And then at the end of class, you have the opportunity to open roll, which the intensity will go up because you're no longer just focusing on just the technical aspect of what you learn, but you're actually in, a round with another person who is, quote unquote, competing with you in that round. And that you can regulate the intensity of that by understanding like where you're at in your own journey, where you're at physically, talking to your partner, selecting partners. So there are days that you'll, be close to RPE 8, RPE 9, RPE 10 in some of those rolls. But there are other days where you just be like, hey, I'm pretty beat up. I'm going to stay flow. Let's flow a little bit more today. Let's stay like a little bit more 50% today. And I think that that's the thing that you have to take control of that aspect of the journey for yourself, but then not be afraid to expose yourself to some of the harder rolls every now and again, like not constantly avoiding going a little bit hard. So it's a balance.
Dude, Gabe, it's a very difficult sport when you start talking about things like RPE because there's so many emotional factors that come into play, right? Sure. And I think that's the hardest part is that emotionally you go in there with the best of intentions, but it takes a long time. Like, dude, it probably took me, like, no joke, 6 years, maybe even 7 years to really understand how to balance my RPE regardless of what my other person is giving me. Like, if I'm going out there with this intention and they're giving me something else, how am I not going to allow my ego to get in the way? How am I going to be like, it's a very interesting journey. And I think you got to go in there recognizing, hey, I just want to be a good training partner. I need to pick the right training partners. I need to be at the right school. There's so many factors about this RP. Because if a big guy, let's just say I'm new, and some giant guy jumps on top of me, dude, like, it's going to be, you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Am I just going to sit here and get submitted over and over? Or am I going to try and bust out of this thing and get crazy? Well, and then all of a sudden you're at an RP 10 when maybe you walked in there with the intention of a 5. So maybe what would have been better is finding a training partner who's a higher belt, who you could say, hey, my intention for today, or hey, you want to go at 80% or whatever. And now you can start hitting the RPE goals you want. Typically, the higher the belt ranking, the more they can control it. The lower the belt ranking, the harder they have to control it. So then that's the way it works.
Yeah. And if you come in as a lower ranking person and you're going 1,000,000% against a higher ranking person, usually they're going to teach you a pretty quick lesson. Like usually you're going to learn really fast that, like, you need to slow down. And you're going to learn kind of the hard way. Either they're going to submit you pretty quickly with like a choke or some sort of break, or they're going to smother you and they're going to, like, physically slow you down until you can't move.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know which one's worse. They're getting cooked is the worst.
I think getting smothered is the worst. I think,
bro, getting smothered is terrible.
I was with this 80cc guy the other day and we were rolling, and I was, dude, he got me a mount, and it was just a tough position because in general, dude, there's just levels to the game. Gabe and I have talked about this extensively in jiu-jitsu.
Levels
than anything
on levels.
Else. There's levels on levels on levels. Like, a black belt here is not the same. It's just crazy. But hey, dude, I know that MDV, I know you got a jam, but we do have to talk about the challenge of the week, right, Gabe? I mean, you and I are the only two people that did it.
I mean, MDV might have done it. MDV, did you give it a shot?
Did you try
one-legged
Did you row 2K and then bench?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Oh boy, dude, no, that was an experience. I mean, Jay, I'm super curious because I think this might have been pretty close, but I wrote it.
Cooked you. I think I got you good.
I hope not.
Let me look.
I was telling Liz this the other day. My goal with these challenges is to talk so much shit and leave it in the air enough that, like, I live rent free in Jason's head while he's doing the challenge. And he's like pushing more than he would have otherwise just because he's like afraid that I might beat him. That's my goal. And I think I accomplished that on this one. I think you were definitely like, dude, if I don't row hard, Gabe might get me in this one, and I don't want that. So either way, I'm going to take that as a win. But 658 was my row. Looking back on it,
658, that's solid, dude.
650. And looking back on it, I would have done like a 710 and not been as messed up. But I knew that I was going to be like right on the bubble of breaking 7. And I was like, man, I haven't been rowing that much. Breaking 7 would be really cool. So I like sent it. And I alluded to this the other day. I think it was on a call or on the podcast. I think it was on the podcast with you, MDB. The minute rest, like, I got off the rower and didn't feel like, you feel terrible. But like, the minute rest goes on and everything just starts pooling in your legs and you feel worse and worse and worse. And I sat down on the bench, and similar to this rogue challenge, like, the way that I looked at it is like, at the minute rest, the bar has to be unracked. So I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, this is not enough rest. I feel worse. I unracked the bar and I got 15 reps at body weight. And then I beat, yes.
So the block is getting hot right now. The block is very hot. So I got 653 on the row.
Okay.
And in hindsight, I could have gone faster, but I think that I was trying to, like, you know. So
yeah.
What is every bench worth on
5
this?
5 seconds. So you have to get 16 or more reps.
Bro, no, I got 14.
Oh, so Gabe.
A tie.
No, you got 15, right?
Tie.
Wait, hang on. You got...
this is impossible. It can't be a tie.
Hang on, you got 15, right?
Yeah, I got
4 minutes of burpees right now to decide.
Dude, so I
got 15 and 658, which is exactly 5 seconds more than 653.
So I got 653. We should have gone to the next decimal. I took a picture of my screen. 653, right? And then I get off and I go to my bench, and I know that I got 14 for sure because I hate finishing on a 13. I never, ever finish any rep on a 13, ever. And so I didn't give a shit if I was going to have to sit that thing on my chest for an hour. I was going to get a 14th rep. But maybe if I had had like Caden or Ashley spot me, maybe I could have gotten 15. So basically, we tied. That's crazy.
Exact tie without sharing the score at all prior to right now. That's pretty crazy.
You know what I'm mostly impressed with? I'm not that impressed with your bodyweight bench, but I am impressed with your row.
I appreciate that. The 2K row is such a mind fuck, dude. And I've done it a handful of times. You do the first 500 meters and you're like, I'm going to set a world record. You feel so good. You see like the expected pace.
Do you remember your first 500?
I don't, but because I was purposely like, you've done this before, like slow down, but you feel so good. And then the second 500, you're like, all right, this is going to suck. The third 500, you're just like trying not to let your pace balloon. And then like doing everything you can to like maintain your pace, everything you can. And then hopefully you get to those last 500. And then at least for me mentally, I'm just taking it 100 meters at a time. I'm like, get to 400, get to 300. Get to 200. And then once you get 200, you're just like, you can do anything for this time, which again, dude, and I told Dennis this because I'm reading this book, Endure. Like I was telling myself the whole time, I was like, dude, your body can go so much faster. It's literally just your mind that wants to stop. Like your body could row a 630 right now. Which is in many ways made that hurt so much more, but it's, I don't know. I'm really enjoying the book. Highly recommend people check out, Endure. It's so good.
Dude, the 2K row, it was tough. And I realized my fastest 2K, I might have gotten sub 620 before, but at the games I did 621.
Disgusting, dude.
So like, dude, I mean,
that's disgusting.
I'd be 630 2K rows like all the time. Like it wasn't like an odd thing for me. And looking at my score, I remember I was starting, I had my projected 2K row and I'm like, I was like, all right, dude, I'm going to shoot for like 645. 640. I'm like, whatever. And I'm rowing and I'm going through my 500 meters. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, this is going to be pretty hard to hold that 640 pace or whatever. And I just slowly started backing off and then telling myself, okay, it's okay to give up a few seconds here because I need to be fresh for the bench press. It's okay to give up a few seconds. I need to be fresh for my bench. I just kept telling myself that. And then by the time I finished, it's at 653. But dude, oh man, it just goes to show how some of that stuff was, Liz says the Lion King playing would have made it a lot better. I guess someone said that at the CrossFit Games,
you requested Lion King.
Yeah, 2K row and a half marathon.
It's like official on Google with like a linked article. Very strange.
Yeah, very strange. But
isn't it so strange? Like the self-talk that you have during workouts or before workouts. It's so, your mind is so strange. So just a quick story here. My buddy last week at the end of the day of like Tuesday texted me. He's like, hey, dude, I really need to do something tomorrow. I'm just like in a funk. Let's do Murph. He just texted me out of the blue. And he's like, I want to do Murph tomorrow. And I was like, well, I can't run, but I can bike and I can do all the other shit. So sure, I'll do it. So the next day comes and like, it's a pretty busy day. And like, I had worked out earlier in the day. I fucking forgot about Murph, forgot about it. And he texts me at like 4:30 in the afternoon. He's like 44 minutes with a vest. And I was like, oh, you motherfucker, dude. Like, how did you, didn't remind me, just went out and did it. And then, so I kind of close my computer and I go outside and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what am I really have to do this now? Like, and this whole like hostage negotiation in my head about, well, okay, if I do a 40-minute bike and then I do like 5 sets, I can text him and say, hey, wasn't feeling it. And, I just did this or whatever. And eventually I just like got on the bike and I was like, I'm gonna do 20 minutes at the start, 10 rounds in the middle, 20 minutes at the end. And it just started. And the entire time I was working out, I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I can only do 7 rounds. I can only do 8 rounds. I can only do 9 rounds. And like this ongoing dialogue just kept happening in my head until I finished it. And I called him and I was like, there's no way I would have done that if you hadn't texted me and said, hey, this was my score, and didn't even like hey, are we still doing this? He just fucking did it. And I was really thankful for that, because I have no way I would have done that on my own. But there's the accountability, self-talk. Yeah.
But that's the accountability piece. Everybody has that. And I think that's why it's so important to have training partners, to have a community of like-minded people that you're trying to get after, because dude, I would consider myself extremely motivated compared to the average individual when it comes to fitness in general. And I still have days where, dude, like I would say the same thing as you, but that's why you got to have other people that's why you have a program to follow. That's why you have to have like these during the week, especially I think the men's club, what it serves for a lot of guys, like this weekly kind of, kind of like what you're saying, like a weekly check-in where it just kind of, it's like a pillar of your week that allows you to kind of an anchor that allows you to get through the rest of the week. And I think everybody needs that, man. It doesn't matter how inspired you are with fitness. Like, and you know what I mean? Cause that's why a lot of times I train with training partners. It just makes it that much easier for me.
Because it can become easy to not show up for yourself sometimes.
For sure.
And then, just having that my buddy texted me and he was just like, I had to do it. Had to.
There's a lot of like very real benefits to like going through those walls, MDV, that are relative to everyone, because you can make the argument, and Andrew Huberman talks about this in relation to the cold plunge, but it applies to everything, in that there were a lot of benefits to you going through that. And every single time you were negotiating with yourself on not doing it and doing it, then a day you feel great and you go out and maybe you like put up a great time. Maybe it was a great workout physically and a great performance, but there are so many just mental and psychological benefits the day you don't feel great, but do it anyway. Because how he talks about it in relation to the cold plunge is that it's less about, to a degree, like I give Jason a hard time about this all the time, but it is less to a degree like the temperature you have it set to or whatever, to an extent. It has to be below something, but it's more about like these walls that like maybe you didn't want to get in the first place and you get in.
Yeah.
Or maybe a minute in, you wanted to get out and you stayed in. Those little things that are going to be relative to you, me, Jason, just depending on how much we do this stuff or how comfortable we are. That's really where a lot of the magic lies in some of this stuff, versus like I did 3 minutes at, 40 degrees versus you did a minute and a half at 50 degrees. But maybe that was significantly more of these walls that you had to get through, versus like, if you've been doing it forever, it's just, you've been doing it forever.
This was undoubtedly one of my slowest Murphs ever. Undoubtedly one of my slowest Murphs ever. Not because of the 20-minute on the bike, but like just the negotiation every single round of whether or not I wanted to do the next round. It was a really interesting experience.
Yeah, but dude, those are the best ones when you're done, man. Like the cold plunge is such a great example. Like I really dislike the cold plunge, really dislike it. And but I also feel very rewarded. Or for example, like I told Gabe, like essentially I'm on a cycle where I'm going to start waking up 15 minutes earlier every week. Like I'm just on a cycle, and I'm just going to get to a point where like I start to see diminishing returns. I haven't seen it yet, but basically at some point I'm not going to get enough sleep to get the recovery that I want to show up for my family. And that's the diminishing return. I'm going to stop, but I haven't found that yet. Right. And so it's
what's
like
the current wake up time?
5:40. So like, it's not that early. Right. So, I mean, it's not crazy early, but every day, 5:40. I mean, even Saturday and Sunday. So because it's 5:40 and then I'm going to stay there for a week, I'm going to go down, or a week or two. I think I told myself 2 weeks, but maybe anyways. And then I'm going to see, dude, maybe at 4:45 or maybe at 5, I start to get diminishing returns because I'm not getting enough recovery time and my workouts start to suffer and my whatever. But right now I haven't seen that. And it gives me more time to read and to work out and just to do a bunch of stuff before the kids wake up.
Yeah. It also, also depends on what the changes on the other end of the routine are, right? Like, are you, going to bed earlier? Are you prepping things at night for the next day? Are you accounting for that 15 minutes on the other end now too, to make sure that, you are getting all that stuff ready for the next
Well, yeah,
day.
that's why I think there's going to be a diminishing return at some point, because I'm still going to bed at the same time. And so that's where at some point, like, hey, you know what I mean? So that's something I'm currently going through that process right now. We'll see what happens.
Gents, I got to hop off, but I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on for a little bit.
Yeah. Later, MDV.
See ya.
There was no like setup. It was just like,
the wake up the early morning things. I had a buddy who listens to the podcast message me the other day. And I think this is like important to recognize. And if I haven't done a good job recognizing this, like, I think it's just important to reiterate. Like, I know and completely understand that like sleep chronotypes are a real thing, man. Like, there are some people that are absolute night owls, do great work at night. They're productive. It's a time when they can like work out. I know people, I have friends here that put their kids to bed and that's their time to go get their workout in. And
Sure.
if that's what works and that's like what fits into your schedule, and then, they are getting up at like, 7:30, 8, whatever, breakfast and starting their day. Everything that I share, whether it's nutrition stuff, whether it's like the alcohol stuff, whether it's, like waking up super early and getting that time back, I always hope that it comes off as like, if you're sitting there and just like, I need to change something. Like, this isn't working. I feel like I'm not being productive enough. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not showing up the way I want to show up. I don't look the way that I want to look. Like, if those things are the case, I do wholeheartedly believe that trying some of these things, if you're not doing them already, and seeing what changes. And also when I say try, like actually try. Don't set the alarm tomorrow for 4:30, wake up, you're tired all day and be like, morning's not for me. Like, no, that's not how trying works. It means setting a realistic goal of what a little bit earlier is. I think giving yourself 30 extra minutes is huge. And then committing to doing that for a week, 2 weeks. What are you doing on the back end of that? Are you changing the time you're going to bed? Are you still staring at your phone right before you go to bed? Are you eating super, close to bedtime? Like, those things have to change a little bit too for you to even give yourself a fighting chance of, feeling good waking up that much earlier and being productive. But if you really, really try that, I think that a lot of people would find incredible benefit from it. But again, if you're like, hey man, I love working out at night, love sleeping in, it's working for me, love the way I feel, super fulfilled, feel like I'm really showing up as a husband and dad, like keep doing you. Like, I think that that's always super, super important. That same way we were talking about like how you split BJJ and fitness, like what works for me may not work for you, may not work for you, Jay, may not work for people listening. But if you're just kind of like spinning your wheels and looking for something to change, I think it's pretty hard to convince me that these things aren't at least worth a shot. And again, like a real shot, not like hey, I tried that. Yeah. Did you try it? Did you really try
like
it?
taking out alcohol, right? And
For
it's
sure.
the same thing. Just give it a shot. And that's critical. Dude, okay. Hey, I know we have an episode with you and me coming up. I want to talk about iron sharpens iron with you. So remind me of that. We're going to make sure we have that conversation then. Also, dude, so bro, we'll talk about it in the next episode. Iron sharpens iron.
You know what's really helped me in general get into, whether it's like prayer or reading Proverbs, as I just showed you for anyone listening, I just put it on the screen. As soon as I start doing this stuff out loud, man, it just is completely different. And I feel like I'm getting more out of it. It feels like even strangely like more authentic, even though maybe you would say that it's like, I don't know, like, and maybe this is, my pre-perception of some of this stuff, but like sillier because you're like talking out loud, but like there's no one else around. But doing everything out loud has been something that has been very different and has helped me be more consistent with this stuff and feel like it's having some sort of impact on me. It's tough to even like articulate that into words because I don't really know like what the change is, but feels positive. And, and that's pretty much all that matters. But it's interesting because I got a lot of that from you and the conversations you've had with, your buddy that invited you to from Sal. And I tried it. And the difference is like, and Miranda mentioned it too, actually on the podcast, the difference is been very immediately noticeable. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a stark difference.
Super different.
When
Incredibly
you start praying out loud.
Incredibly different. Yeah.
So make sure you stay tuned. We'll have to we will have to have a conversation about iron sharpens iron for like a longer conversation because it's going to blow your mind, bro. It's going to blow everybody's mind when I tell them this story. Last note, okay? Before I get to my last note. This is my second to last note.
My mind is still blown by the fact that we tied exactly on this thing.
No, so here's what happened. We tied. Okay, so guys, if you're listening to this episode, okay, well, obviously you're listening to this episode because you're hearing us. You got to give us a favor. Because we tied on our score, we need you to go leave us a rating and review on the podcast. That's basically what it's telling people, Gabe, is that, hey, if you've been getting value out of this podcast, listen to other episodes, listen to home team episodes, listen to Gabe and I. It really helps out the podcast to leave us a rating and review. And so if you've been listening to the show for a while and you hear me bring this up, you're like, dude, all right, Jay, I'll do it another time. No, the time is now, okay? Gabe and I tied, which is just a great time for you to go and leave us a rating and review as a reward for both of us because we tied, Gabe. There you go, okay? Grand finale idea. Months and months ago, Gabe goes, dude, you gotta start taking at the men's club, everybody has to start. You
know what I sound like?
That. No, you don't sound anything like that. Hey, but you guys start getting all the guys start taking off their shirt for the picture at the end. And dude, when I first started this in the men's club, it was like very awkward. We probably had like maybe 5 people you think take their shirts off. And now, dude, this most recent one, I don't know, man. We probably had 20 guys taking off their shirt, looking pretty damn jacked. So I just want to say that if you and your group of buddies or whatever, like the learning lesson there is like, if you present it in a way that makes sense, and if you give someone something to inspire to, eventually people will realize that what you're trying to do is do nothing but just level everybody up, because one by one, man, the shirts are coming off, because I'm pitching it as, dude, you guys should feel comfortable. Like, I want you to get to a point where you can run down the street and feel comfortable with your shirt off. And if you're not there today, keep it on. But the goal is to get there. And then do these guys week after week. They get a little bit more comfortable. They get a little bit more confident. They get a little bit more whatever. And then boom. It's been great, dude. I just want to give you a shout out.
You know why? It's because how people look is a direct reflection of their habits. 100%. Dude, it is. It is. And I know that that's like a specific phrase that we've had, some conversations about. But dude, like, it's so true. And that isn't to shame or judge anyone for where they are now. It's a fact. And if that fact makes you uncomfortable, the goal is to encourage you to do the things to like feel so confident in how you look that you do want to take your shirt off. Like, that's the goal. And the only thing that's going to get you there is adopting healthier habits. It's like the most real reflection of like the decisions that you make day in and day out. And we all have different circumstances that have put us into like a different starting line, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, like, so what? Like, what are you going to do about it now? And if you do want to go out there and be super pumped to take your shirt off and show off the hard work that you put in, that is fucking awesome. But the reason that it's awesome and the reason that these guys are so fired up and proud to do that is because you are helping them improve their habits. And therefore, this is the visual representation of that. They can't carry a card around that says, hey, now I'm healthier. Now I, work out more. Now I drink less. Now I make better decisions. It's not a thing. But what they can do is be like, hey, check this out. It's a lot of hard work went into this. And what I love about it is that like, it's not even something like money can't buy. It really can't, man. Like, you put the work in or you don't. That's it. Shit or get off the pot. And that's what I love, man. And you can't convince me otherwise. I don't know why. It's like something that, you don't feel passionate about, but like, dude, way you look, reflection of your habits, period, full stop. And it's pumped to see, I'm pumped to see those pictures in Train Hard Men's Club, because that is like the most powerful visual representation of exactly that. And you're changing that for these guys. And that is fucking awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're going to have a rally. I'm wondering, I don't know how many people are going to have for Ava's Kitchen Men's Club, but I'm hoping to have like 80 to 100 guys. That's the goal. We'll see. That's a lot of guys. And hopefully at least half of them are ready to take their shirt off because they feel comfortable and confident about what they're trying to do. So yeah, man, it's good. It's all good. Well, stay tuned on the next episode for the talk about iron sharpens iron. And I will get back to, what do we call him? We called him John. Well, I'll get back to John about figuring out that regular weight loss target. And, but I think my main takeaway from that particular point is like, I pitched something to Gabe and Gabe's like, dude, if you follow our flex track or our train hard daily or, the force track and you read and really digest the train hard 5, dude, there's nothing that should hold you back from achieving the goals you want to achieve. And so, yeah, big takeaway. So make sure you go check out all the things we have going on. Make sure to go leave the podcast a rating and review. And dude, aside from that, man, Gabe, I'm fired up. I'm ready to run through a couple of brick walls this week and keep training hard. We'll see you guys again next week for the next episode.